Welcome to the wasmCloud community meeting for Wednesday, May 22nd. Today, we're going to be doing kind of just a general update on capability providers, which will be pretty sweet to see. And then we're going to be moving on from there to talk. Oh, I didn't share. Here we go. Moving on from there to talk about the Postgres RFC and implementation, which will be should be a pretty fun discussion. And then we'll go on to our regular roadmap review, which there were a couple of things that moved around on that board. So we'll just call those out really quick and then go from there. So talking generally about capability providers, there are a couple of really exciting things coming down the pipeline for providers in general with wasmCloud. The first one, which I think we can go ahead and get started about, is Postgres. So Bailey put out an RFC, I guess about a month ago, around, hey, get out of here, about a month ago to talk about implementing a Postgres interface. Generally, within wasmCloud, a highly requested feature is to be able to access SQL-based data stores, and I think that this is still very much a requirement for developers. And SQL interfaces can vary pretty significantly between flavors. So the first one that we're looking to start with is Postgres. Postgres is pretty easy to launch locally. It's pretty compatible with today's cloud. SQL providers, like many different hosted solutions, offer a Postgres compatible front end. So I think uh, constraining ourselves to a specific, front end interface for Postgres really doesn't hurt us in terms of portability, but it's a great level of abstraction to start with. So I know that Bailey detailed, design, backwards compatibility, alternatives here. There's been some really awesome discussion afterwards with Victor and Taylor and so on and so on. I'm not going to overview the entire RFC here, but this is definitely something that we're going back and forth on in the open here. So we're really looking for feedback on this RFC. Now, to complement that RFC, here just a moment. To complement that RFC, we actually have I was trying to resolve something with Zoom. We have a PR now in the wasmCloud repo for, well, Victor adding an implementation of the Postgres provider. So this is an open PR. We've been going back and forth on review comments. Thank you to a different Victor and Taylor and Bailey for taking a look at this PR. But there's a lot of space here for innovation and design with the Postgres provider. So if you're looking to try it out and give some feedback, I guess I'll show where this was. Victor added this example Rust component SQLDB Postgres managed in here. And this outlines just the steps like running Postgres in a Docker container, running or building the provider and the example, and then running the code. So this is the actual code for the Postgres query runner. And he's using a very simple interface here. And this is an interface that takes no arguments and returns a string is the function syntax we support with wash call. So just in the interest of being simple, that's what this function or what this component exposes. But you can see here what it looks like to create a table, to insert some information into that table, and then there might actually be an example otherwise in the component to pull data out of there. So I know that a ton of work went into this provider. If you take a look in here at the WIT, there's actually a ton. My browser starts to get sad. There's a ton of information around connections and queries that we're talking about, but around the data types that Postgres uses and kind of mapping that to WIT. So really interested before we take a look at actually merging this PR and cutting the first release of the SQL provider and getting folks feedback. So if anybody has an example Postgres data set that they'd like to try out with this. I think now is a perfect time. That would be a great way to contribute to wasmCloud. Um, I think that that's all that I wanted to mention about Postgres on my end. Bailey or Taylor, did you have additional commentary for the Postgres implementation for now?
Not really. I know that Taylor has given an initial review. I am due to give my review today. So if anybody wants to give feedback, you would be right there with us on that iteration. I know that we were planning on making some tweaks to the width definition that's up there right now. So there are some things that are going to change. And then after that, I think, as I put in the RFC, my proposal was like, let's get this in, let's get this rolling, get some real applications building on top of it and see how we feel about it. And then I think the next thing on the docket would be to approach more types of storage providers. Um, and if somebody is like really passionate about a certain one that they want to get started on, now is probably also the time to start talking about that. Best place would be in the wasmCloud Slack.
Alrighty. Do folks have any other questions or comments around the Postgres example, especially if you've taken a look at it?
Bailey, what would probably be the next target, you think?
Um, I know that we've got some excitement around getting Couchbase up. Since we already have NoSQL style, like just KV with Redis, aka Valky, if you're using the Valky provider. So Couchbase is one that's kind of interesting in terms of relational databases. The one that I was most geeked on was SQLite, because a lot of things just essentially implement that and by many other names. So that was probably the next interface that would be the
Yeah,
highest
that's a good
target.
one. Especially with the embedded stuff that's going on. I mean, I think one of the big features of this is it seems like there's always a new database every week, right? And kind of the advantage of that biggest hurdle for those people is making an SDK in, the most popular languages. So almost like if we had somebody who came out with the next next week's, it's like, oh hey, see if you can make a wit. I don't know.
Yeah, that would be the ideal. I know that we've already reached out and are starting a collaboration with some other providers that, our ultimate goal is to have, these premier ecosystem of providers that just work and aren't, wasmCloud necessarily plus, but provided by those actual providers. So like my ideal world, I guess what I'm talking about is Couchbase contributes and maintains a provider. And same with SQLite community and the Postgres community and everybody.
Yeah, that's once we get the momentum going, that's gonna be great.
It's super exciting to see this starting to get some traction. I know Johan and I were talking with Victor a little bit when we were in France about this, particularly database providers and specifically Postgres. And actually, before this call, we were looking at like some architecture diagrams for some ideas we have that could possibly use something like this. So very timely. But not helpful, but figured I'd come on and show some excitement, and on his behalf as well, as he has a meeting has to be in, but that I weaseled my way out of. So I'm sure he'll watch this back. He was really not super thrilled to miss this one.
Hey, that's awesome to hear. Yeah, Tyler, let us know if there's anything that we can do to kind of like package this up in a nice bundle for you to try out. Like even if it's a pre-release version, because I think we would love to have something. The demo example is awesome, and something a little more rigorous to prove it out is even better. That'd be great.
Yes, we were planning to talk a little bit more about it later this afternoon, so we'll probably be in touch.
right. Any other questions, comments around the Postgres provider? Quiet long enough that Yortis just left, so that's pretty cool. Okay, then I think we can go ahead and move on. I have one more thing that I want to mention around capability providers, and then we'll go on. I think we have a secret agenda item that we'll be able to sneak in here, which will be pretty fun. So around capability providers, we've also been doing a lot of work around the wasmCloud provider SDK for Go. Now, this essentially just mirrors the same functionality that the provider SDK has in Rust, but in Go. And this was something that I believe I showed off as part of extending on top of the WRPC, the WIT-RPC implementation in Go. However, I don't know if I really showed what this looks like in depth. So I just wanted to talk a couple of details about the provider SDK and mentioned that there are many examples coming so that if you're interested in implementing providers in Go, you should have a good base of what to a base to work on top of. So this PR, which is in the provider SDK Go repository, includes the updates to the provider SDK to work with wasmCloud 1.0. What this looks like for an actual provider implementation. This one, for example, we have a main.go and then an implementation of the key value, the WASI key value store in this function called keyvalue.go. And this works really similarly to our Rust SDK, where inside of our world, we'll say, hey, we're going to export the functionality this is WRPC key value, which is a streamlined version of WASI key value, but it's compatible over with RPC and with the interface store at 020 draft. Now, in the main function, and this will be a good example essentially for any capability provider, it'll probably look similar no matter what the actual implementation is. Essentially, with main, I'm just delegating out to a run function to keep main nice and simple. But the way that it works is you use the provider SDK to create a new provider. And you can you can provide any number of essentially callback overrides for, when you receive a new link. What do you need to do? Do you need to set up resources? When you delete a link, do you need to get rid of resources? How do you want to handle the health check? How do you want to handle shutting down? Do you need to finish transactions that are in progress? And all of those are just simple functions here. At the bottom, all I do is log a print line saying that I got it. So this will be a great kind of template example. And then you use the generated WRPC interface, not trait, to serve using the RPC client and this provider type struct. Nice. Sorry, I'm getting used to Go words. It's something that's somewhat new to me. So all the main function is essentially going to do is wait here for either the provider to be told to shut down, or if you're running this in like a command line context, you can hit Control C to kill it. Now the nice thing is that actually implementing these interfaces, you do need to implement the interface exactly as it's specified in the WIT. So this specific example is just using an in-memory map in order to implement the key value functionality. So for stuff like, I'm doing a little work here, for stuff like set, we basically load the bucket out of this Go map. And then as long as that bucket exists based on the interface, we can store the value at that key and then return an OK. This is an example of how you'd implement it with like an in-memory thing. Now, this is the same for every single component that's going to be calling this, and which is why I have this, which I'll talk about in a second. But the cool thing is you can use Go build to build this provider. I mean, there's nothing really special here. And you can actually use Go generate to generate all of the bindings. And this is generated directly from WIT. And that is through the, if you look in main.go, I think, yeah, that's actually using the WIT bindgen WRPC project, which is the same thing that our Rust provider SDK uses, which is WIT bindgen WRPC for Rust. But this one is obviously for Go. And now that we've set this up, if I were to not conform to this interface, so I implement WASI key value store, but I don't implement set, you see if I comment this out, immediately we get an error in main, and we can see when we go to serve RPC, you all can see the kind of pop over here, right? The actual error that you get is, hey, you can't use this struct. You don't implement the interface for store. You're missing your method set, and you can see all of the methods here. So if you were really interested in seeing what kind of function you need to implement, you can go to take a look at the bindings, and you can see the set function. Here is the actual interface for the handler. And then, of course, if we'll get the same thing if we try to build. I think the ID is just giving me that nicely. But as soon as we implement it, we can build this as a provider. I have a little sample run function here that basically pretends to be giving the provider data from the host and then does what the host does, which is base64 it and then pass it in on standard in. So you can run this capability provider directly. I find this really, really useful for testing. And of course, you can shut it down. Now, let's see. I've got some time. Why don't we do a fun thing? So there was another, I was working on SQL. There was another really cool utility that I think Roman showed in a previous community call, and that is using this binary called WRPC key value nats. And what this can do is based off of a prefix, you can actually directly invoke these WIT functions using WRPC, using a nice little command line interface. And now my selfish want is to essentially get this upstreamed and put into wash. This essentially becomes the next generation of wash call to be able to invoke any WRPC exposed function. But if we were to do something like run this binary, and this prefix here is very specific, you can see I'm telling this provider to run with a lattice prefix of default, and then the provider ID is key value in memory. This is essentially what the host will assign to the provider at runtime. That is this WRPC prefix. And then we're calling the function store.set with a bucket called bucket, and bucket called bucket, key called foo, and a value bar. No, that's not right. Store.set, bucket called bucket, foo. Is the value then? Oh, it reads it from standard in. Okay, I did forget that. So we can send bar and then, control D to stop that. Now, if I do a store.get with the bucket foo, we get bar back. Look at that. So a different example, just to show you that it's real, I guess we can do Baz, and the real way or a different way to do this would be like, echoing community directly into this. And then so that returns immediately, and then we can just store.get with Baz. So this is a much nicer, in my opinion, way of testing the provider without really mocking the functionality. It's really nice to be able to call these implementation or these endpoints directly with WRPC. If you take a look at this binary, you can see that it's just using the same WIT definitions and types that we would generate essentially on the component side. So I will definitely be working with Roman to see if we can push this up into Wash. Roman has other planned
It's also
improvements to this, but I won't spoil it just in case.
that's also a great way to debug MySQL or Postgres SQL providers and connections. That's always such a difficult part of any application development is to actually make sure you're talking to the right database. So that's really awesome that you can just in Roman stuff can go beyond key value nats, right? It's more general purpose, right? So
Yeah.
that's gonna be so nice to do. Just like, hey, this is a sanity check. As we
Yeah,
get to
for
more
sure.
complicated data stores and stuff like that.
For sure. I definitely can see this getting hard if we're trying to pass like binary data or really, nested lists of binary data on the command line. But for a lot of these things, like for key value, I mean, even HTTP, we can take structured command line arguments to form a request. This is going to be super nice. And you can use the same utility, the invoking providers to invoke components as well, like anything that's exported, you could use this for. Sorry, I saw a ton of movement in the chat, but it looks like it was all addressed. So everybody feel free to chime in if there are more questions there. But I just wanted to give an additional, kind of deep dive into what the provider SDK Go looks like. We should be able to get this PR merged in pretty quickly. And then the follow-up steps, which let me see if I can pull up. I stop sharing. That's pretty fun. The follow-up steps here is essentially that we need I'm going to be creating a blank provider template for Rust and for Go. And so that'll just include like the bare bones setup. You should be able to take that. And then in the documentation, that's what this specific PR is that I'm pausing on to create those blank provider templates is going to talk through what it means to create a custom capability provider, how to edit the width so that you can, add your own imports and exports. What does it mean to have an import and export? Um, all of these improvements to the capability providers really fall under this bubble that we focus for a long, long time on the developer experience and how it feels to build components. And I think providers is definitely something that you could be successful with by being in the wasmCloud Slack and asking like, hey, how do I build this provider? But we need a little extra around that, and this is that extra. Especially see Tyler nodding his head off. I know that you all built custom providers, and so you probably have firsthand experience with this. So um, I think that that's really all I wanted to say there. Tyler, feel free to chime in if you had thoughts, but
Everything
anything on
takes time.
providers.
It's a growing ecosystem, but it's great to see a lot of stuff get love.
All right. Well, then I think that we can move on from capability providers for today. And I apologize. I actually think I missed putting this on the agenda, but we did talk a little bit in time is fast. I believe second to last community meeting around the recommendations for storing WASM and the WASM artifact type in OCI. And I know that Taylor has been essentially pushing that forward with other members in the WASM working group in the CNCF. And I think Taylor, you have an update on this front.
Yeah, I don't know if I remember showing this last time. Well, one of them I know I haven't shown, but there's a couple things here. So, first off, um, actually I'll come back to the PR. In case I didn't show this, here it is again. This is actually from the tag runtime deliverables, which is what the WASM working group is a part of. I will drop this in chat right now. And then perfect. Okay, so that's in there. And then the the whole point of this is that we have a standardized format that works with it's still an OCI artifact. There's nothing special. You don't have to upgrade a registry to support this. Um, and it has ability to basically include the metadata around like what are the imports and exports. It basically synthesizes this from the world so that the actual manifest is searchable without pulling down the artifact. Um, and so the the whole point of this is that now we can use it across everywhere. We've gotten people to agree to this. This is a group effort, like Brooks mentioned, across bunch of different companies across CNCF, people from the CNCF, people from Bytecode Alliance. And so to that end, we actually already have a PR up for this um, that changes things out. So basically when we release the next version of Wash and the next version of the host, um, you will be able to pull or put whenever you push, it'll push this new form of artifact. You won't even have to think about it. It'll do it all for you. And then it will also be able to pull those artifacts and it'll still support the old stuff. The old stuff is still there, so anything you've pushed won't break. But everything else will be using this new manifest type. So I just wanted to bring that up that we have that implemented. We're working across the various projects right now. There's an SDK and REST for this. I'm going to be going through this week and making sure tools like ORS and a couple other things also have support for it. By support, I mean it's just a thin wrapper around existing OCI clients, and then the types for the config. So that's what's going on here. Pretty exciting news. We'll have this merged relatively soon as I have another host maintainer. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge to people here in the call to review this since we changed Wash and the host. So that is that. Any questions?
So how does it work today in wasmCloud?
Everybody kind of does their own thing, which is why we wanted to standardize this. We're all using OCI artifacts. But right now, you can actually see right here, we use these two other media types. So this new one, WASM layer media type, is what I added. But these old ones, WASM media type, I actually think I can click on this in GitHub and it shows me the type, was just one that we kind of all said, oh yeah, sure, let's use this. Way back when. This is back like in Crestlet days, in 2019. So we just kind of decided, and then it's kind of stuck around like, oh, we'll just do this. But it didn't really account for the component model and the different things. So it's been swapped to basically be just application WASM, application/WASM for the layer media type, and then a specific config media type so that you know you can parse it as the config type we've defined. So beforehand, it's not like we're still pushing basically the same thing. It's just how it's being represented in the manifest is different.
But this was a consensus, not just wasmCloud's version.
Yeah, this was because we all had our own thing. And so we came up with this was a group effort between people were involved from us, from Microsoft, from Fermion, from Fastly, and then like different people from the OCI group who were involved with that were involved here. So we made sure we pulled in all the correct parties and interested stakeholders who have been doing this for a while and just centered around something. And this is something we'll continue to iterate on. This is just the first version, and as the component model evolves, this can evolve and we'll have different versions of the config that can note that. Okay, any other questions? Hey, one last little bonus thing I'm going to throw in here. So we finally, there's a couple of people in the community. There's a lot of people who've been doing stuff with WDAM. So this will matter to some people, and other people will be like, okay, great. But that's what we're here for. So we split up WDAM into types crates so that you could pull in the types without extra dependencies, and also a new actual client library so that you didn't have to roll your own NATS requests. So that is going to be merged right now because Brooks approved it. So I'm going to confirm that and merge it. So that is now merged. And when we release the new version of WDAM here in a little bit, we're going to have that new client library available as well as the types library and all of that basically ready to use. So for those people who've been messing around with WDAM or doing things, and then also in things like the wasmCloud operator and in Wash, we'll update to use that client and make things a lot easier.
Yeah, I saw some stuff in I saw a PR in the wasmCloud repo around a Wadham capability provider.
That's going to be sick. I can't wait to have that done, and we'll get the said community member who's building it to see if they want to show it off.
Yeah, just to preview the PR at least. This was really cool to see. Like, if we take a look, if we crack open the PR a little bit and take a look at the Wadham wit, like it's just translating the Wadham client into, deploy response, put model response, model summary, all these types natively represented. I had I had kind of what's the right word? A heretical idea that this means we could take we take the Wadham client and then have that automatically compiled down to a WASM component using this interface. So that might be something that we could do, and then it would work kind of out of the box with a provider that's like providing the real client. I think the main thing that we're talking about, honestly, which I left for a moment, but obviously this is getting celebrated, is just whether or not this should live here or live in the Wadham repository. Like, it might be quicker to iterate on if there are changes in the Wadham repository, because we can go ahead and bump and update the provider at the same time. I think this generally goes back to our question of should Wadham be living in this repository, which brings in a good couple of pros and cons. That sounds like a conversation for another day, but the reality is it's pretty cool lining this up with some wit. And WashLib should get a lot better ergonomic updates, like and the Kubernetes operator as well, from having a Wadham client specifically. It'll be really nice. Yeah, Liam.
Brooks, so now that Wadham's going to have a cool API that's accessible via wasmCloud, what are some of the things that you might think you might do with that? Just like, or like use cases to get people thinking about, ways to leverage that.
You didn't have time to use the virtual hand, so
No, I couldn't find it. I have too many buttons on my toolbar. So I use my real hand, like a real physical person in meat space. Anyway, so I'm sorry. Woo. Coming off the COVID train. Guess it's making me loopy. Anyway, so the I'm sorry. Back to what I was actually saying. So the exciting thing here is that if we have an API that's inside of, I mean, and you could do this as it is, but it'd have to be its own separate binary right now. What you could do is have a component that is listening for whatever type of data that you want it to, and have it be reactive to change things inside of WDAM, because WDAM, you can use it to scale and say, like, this is my like you can scale up to this many of these things running at the same time. And so you can dynamically scale these based on incoming data. So you have lots of really interesting use cases there, because for people at like large enterprises, you're talking about being able to monitor real-time data from that we already expose from wasmCloud, and also your like own existing internal metrics data, and be able to use that to drive changes to WDAM manifests on the fly, to change the amount of things that you're scaling it to. And then you can use it with all sorts of other types of data that whatever you want to plug in, really. And you can do it from a component. So you could basically have like another component helping manage your load on your cluster.
I'm just going to use my meat space hand too, Taylor. So the data, what kind of data are you thinking?
Oh boy. I mean, Bailey and I have had many conversations when we've just been shooting the breeze about what we could do here, and we really should formalize some of those crazy ideas. But this could be data that's coming from Prometheus metrics. This could be data that's coming from analysis of the WebAssembly modules that you're running. This could be data that's coming from uh, the hosts, the underlying hosts that you're running, and you could be using CPU and memory data. All of these types of things can be used to drive this. And all you'd have to do is basically you're creating a component that's an adapter for that. It receives that data through whatever interface you define. It could be through the messaging interface, or it could be through a new Prometheus interface. Doesn't really matter. And then as it receives that data, it can make calls to the WDAM API through the WDAM interface that's being defined in that PR.
Very cool. All right. So what I'm hearing is, let me just repeat back. So what this new API for WADM, the WebAssembly Deployment Manager, which maybe should be called WAPplications, really would let you do real-time changes to your applications in real time. So you could use like metrics data to modify the running parameters of your app, or an outside system or tool could make modifications to your WAPplication while you're running it in WADM. Trolling's such an art. Okay, thank you. I understand.
The strategy is not to react. That's what's happening right now.
I think we're all in a race just to register WAPplications.com. So I think I've got Gandhi already up. I've almost got it registered. Just give me just a minute and then I'll own it. Just add it to my collection of many, many domains.
You can get WAPplications and then WAPplicationless.com.
Then I'll get WAPplicationless. That's, you know me so well, Brooks. Every talk I go into, I always get thinking about what's my off ramp. So I have containerless, WASMless, try to think ahead.
Quantum litless. Yeah.
Let's
I'm gone.
CPU litless.
Taylor, you killed me. Oh man. Okay. I'm gonna keep going before I just laugh at Taylor gifts for the rest of the community call. Woo. Okay. All right. So moving on from applications, I just wanted to do a quick check-in on the wasmCloud roadmap. There have been a few things that have moved on the roadmap page, so I just want to call attention to the things that have changed in status. I do want to note that we are, some of the maintainers and I are taking a look this week into like an initial RFC on pluggable secrets management. So that is something that we are working on now. That was one of the most popular things from the roadmap. Obviously, I'm not going to promise that we have it fully implemented and ready by the end of this week, but this week, next week, you should expect to see an RFC on some initial design, some diagrams, how it might work, the use cases we're considering. So that one we're going to be publishing out as soon as we have it ready in the community for comments. I think alongside that, we'll probably get started with some initial implementation too, because just around along with design, actually seeing it work and the difference between config and secrets is going to be a really important part of wasmCloud applications. So that is where we're moving there. This hasn't actually, we'll leave it here. I'm not going to move this status yet because a PR will, or an RFC will come out and then we'll be able to take it through the work stages here. Now, this example actually provide aliases for commonly shortened commands has already started. Thank you so much to this GitHub member who took on a small part of this or a part of this morning. So that's already merged in. The TLDRs that Wash is getting some additional aliases. If you've ever typed in wash link delete and thought, that's dumb, why do I have to type wash link del? This one is for you. So any other comments around that? please feel free to, or any other aliases that you're interested in seeing, please feel free to let us know. For the majority of these are free. You know, we would never offer a wash link del and a wash link delete as separate commands. So I guess I'll look back on that comment in the future when there's a super nuance between del and delete that we want to separate. I don't know. Looking on from there, Postgres, which we talked about earlier in the community call, is moving along great. It has an initial implementation, has an example, has some design space around it. So getting in some extra feedback there before we submit an ADR to close out this RFC would be great. I believe all of the items here in completed were here. Actually, maybe the one that Taylor just merged that we talked about 20 minutes ago, add support for the new WASM artifact type, was something that moved since last week. So that's really awesome to see. Support goes into the host and will be released first, and then probably the next minor release of Wash will start pushing to that new artifact type instead, and then nobody will know the difference. We will keep the same support for pulling components and pulling providers, whatever the existing media type, at least until wasmCloud 2.0. So that support will be around for a long time, and we're not going to remove that. Other than that, architecture diagrams is a pretty nebulous general example, but I do want to call attention to some of the new documentation on WADM. We have some new architecture diagrams here, and we're adding new ones to the doc site all the time. So in the wasmCloud documentation under WADM, you see a new diagram around the lifecycle of an application deployment. You know, where does it get stored in an AtsKV bucket? There's an event stream, command stream, all this good stuff. This was a request in the WADM repo as well to document some of the streams that we use. And you can have a little bit more of an idea, what it looks like internally for a WADM scaler to be in its reconciling state. This is the reconciliation loop that all of the WADM scalers are doing behind the scenes to make sure that things are running and continue to run. So I know that this one, I think this diagram came from Miro. We have many other diagrams too from Excalidraw. Excalidraw just put out a cool new thing today where it can convert a sequence diagram into an Excalidraw diagram. I'm not sure if you all have seen that, but if you use this tool, it's up here in this like AI section, whatever. I created a couple sequence diagrams last week, like for, this is the build time life cycle of a component. This is the runtime life cycle of the component. I'm sure this is unbearably small on the Zoom share, but I think this would be great to throw on the docs. And if folks have suggestions around the actual diagramming tools, I think Excalidraw and Miro, even though they're in a Twitter fight right now, are both great for conveying information. So I don't see a reason why we can't use both. Liam.
I really like, I feel like the docs have been maybe one of the underemphasized stories for 2024. And it's been so many people working on it, but a huge call out to Eric over at Cosmonic, who has just been relentlessly grinding away at reimagining and reshaping the documentation experience with a ton of help from everybody on images. I would love to maybe see as a standing feature of the wasmCloud community meeting, maybe a new doc of the week, where we sort of just highlight what are the new documentation changes and additions, and just do a call to action. It would only take 30 or 60 seconds and say, hey, we just launched this page and that page. We just let people get some feedback, highlight new features, kind of close the loop on all the progress there.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. And, to that point, Liam, I'd really like to share our wasmCloud documentation page of the week. This one is called Useful WebAssembly Tools. So thank you so much, Eric, for putting this one in. I don't remember if this was last week or early this week, or maybe even before, but I remember finding it at some point last week. And this is an awesome reference for working in the WebAssembly ecosystem, starting from, hey, you're using VS Code and you want some syntax highlighting for WIT? Here you go. Here's the extension maintained by the Bytecode Alliance. There's also the information around the tree sitter WIT. We have info on dependency management, artifact manipulation with WASM tools, WASM time. There's been a lot of improvements to the documentation around virtualizing components with WASI-Virt, which also comes, this is something that we talk about in the community call, but if you're looking for more information here, we also now have a virtualize page. Oops, sorry, this week's documentation page feature includes more than one, where we talk about how WASI-Virt works and getting into an example of that. And then also using the WAC CLI tool in order to link these components at build time using the WAC tool in the WAC language. So there is tons of new information here under the useful WebAssembly tools page. Liam, I hope that wasn't too forward, but I did see this one and I thought, well, if we're going to highlight anything, this one's the one to do it. So I think that's a perfect thing for us to emphasize going forward because we're adding new documentation what it feels like every day. All right, folks. Well, it looks like we have about 5 minutes left. Sorry, Bailey, left it for just long enough. Does anybody have anything else that we would like to bring up as a part of the community call? General WebAssembly ecosystem advancements, wasmCloud questions? Floor is open.
It's kind of related to documentation, but would it be possible to create a troubleshooting section on the discussions? And the intent is that, trying to make searching indexing friendly for people that are running into problems instead of, being in a Slack where we lose the history or don't have it at all. So that way the community having a space that is, hey, document the troubleshootings and the fixes, like if it was a Stack Overflow type of situation.
You thinking like a GitHub discussion or just more on the documentation page or site?
I think both. What I've done in the past is promote first, gathering the information, and then you're gonna start realizing common patterns and really, go up. So you could move into the official documentation and say, hey, you're probably gonna run into this because it's really common, based on your environment or whatever. Or instead of relying on documentation, you either fix the tools or provide tools that help you to deal with the problem. But I would say for now, it's just encourage the space of, hey, please document here. It's okay to make silly mistakes. Doesn't really matter. What matters is to have the information. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Under our debugging like doc on the documentation, we have I think a pretty constrained set of use cases around components. I mean we talk about a couple of pretty unique error cases, but what I have seen in the search history on wasmcloud.com is that it's not uncommon for people to take an error message they get in the CLI and drop it straight into the search bar. And so I think if we can identify error messages that happen based on common workflows, like not a bug that we would specifically fix, but like something was unlinked and you have to get an error message, that's something that we can drop into the troubleshooting page and that can get indexed and people can search for it.
One thing I'd like to see too is a contributing to the docs page and a contributing section overall. And I think part of that could be a clear path to, logging issues, contributing issues, that you'd particularly like to see documentation on.
Yeah, related to this, with like today we already have the Q&A, the discussions, right? So ideally that will become like the how to this, how to that, like all the time, and then you analyze that and move into the official talks or provide better developer experience. That's what I found based on my experience in other open source projects.
Yeah, I've actually recently was on the I'm lost and confused path of the world, and I was using the component troubleshooting docs to figure out what if it was my component that was having the problem. And I was really happy with the debugging invocation section that's on this page on the component troubleshooting. So I think, as you say, we need to keep filling in this page, because also shout out to anybody that maintains their own DocuStore site. Brooks configured ours to use this tool that's free for us to use because we're open source, Algolia search. It's so good. So like the combination of that and then the current like walkthrough that we had for using, I'd watched Taylor run WashSpy a whole bunch, but I hadn't really run it myself, and I had a really good experience working through that. So we need more of that, right? Like we definitely need I'm doing X and I'm getting this error in that on that page.
Yeah, just in case people haven't seen this before, you should be able to see it everywhere. It's in the header. There's a search button up here. If you use like a, what's it called? Command tray, whatever switcher, you can also do like Command K to bring this up. But for anything, it's indexed. So if you type in wash by, our CLI documentation comes out first, but it can also link you right to the debugging information for wash by. Search is pretty good. Would recommend. All right, everyone. Well, I think that kind of brings us to the top of the hour here. I think we can go ahead and call it here. And I don't know. Looking forward to next week with all the other cool stuff we're going to show off. Thanks, everyone. And we will. What did I say we're going to do next week? We'll figure it out for next week. I said it earlier in the call.
Next week we've got a demo of the SQL DB provider. Victor's going to be on. He's going to give the demo, the walkthrough, and give everybody some hands-on demonstration of that.
Yep. That
That
sounds great.
does sound great.
Y-
Oh, and talk.
Alrighty.
Oh, I thought that was a secret. Keep it safe.
Thanks, everybody.
It's dangerous out there. Take this.
Are you stopping the recorder and disconnecting altogether?
I don't know. It gets kind of more and more fun the longer I leave it on.